well as Sarah, Cassandra. Awesome. So I'd just like to pick from a few of us in the course of the week, whatever we ended up engaging in. I know some teams shared with each other 2 weeks commitments. Uh, Let me just reiterate, and that is actually extremely good because I'm sure what it did is that it allowed us, Johnson, to begin to have a good sense of where we are with each other. Because really, for us to fight for one another towards the goals that we will set. And tonight, I want to handle the topic of the five. There are several stages to accurate goal setting. There are several stages, and tonight, I want us to go through that. But first, I want to go to Cassandra, and then I'll go to Shiko. Then I'll come to us here, George, and the rest, just to hear our thoughts on what we tried and what we learned, and whether there was anything surprising there. So, Cassandra, are you able to unmute and share with us what you tried and what you learned, and if there was anything surprising? If not currently, let me know.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
Thank you,
evening.
Mr. Simon, for the opportunity. And I missed last week session,
Uh-huh.
so I did not follow much.
Okay.
But um, what we tried with the team, I tried is that so far we have reached out to each other in terms of rewards of accountability, and so we are going from there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. It's worth celebrating. We said that in the early phases of a new approach to doing things, tenacity is required, and we are not looking for perfection. We are looking for progress. And thank you, Cassandra, and the triad that you're in as you push towards, uh, getting the full grasp of things. And don't worry, I'll do a quick recap. Uh, as even and especially this session begins the proper momentum, and I know you'll have a lot to do next week. On the same Shiko.
Um, so, thank you for this opportunity. In my triad, we have Patricia and Marguerite,
Mm-hmm.
and it started last week by into the group, WhatsApp group, and each one of us shared. We got to first know one another by
Mm-hmm.
knowing what is someone focusing on in this season, so
Mm-hmm.
that we're able to guide one another.
Mm-hmm.
So, so far, we know one another.
Yeah.
We know what each one of us is focusing on for the next for 2 weeks. Not
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks. The second week being this week,
Mm-hmm.
and I am sure my parents have done their assignment.
Yeah.
So we also challenged one another to put in bidii.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, I don't know if I have answered your
No,
question, but
that's a very very good update, Chico. Perhaps the only so you formed the triads, you began to touch base with each other, and I like the questions you asked each other on the commitment for the next 2 weeks. It's equivalent to the question God asked Adam. Adam, where are you now? Because when someone tells you, when someone tells you what they are focusing on in the next 2 weeks, they are telling you you're getting a sense of where they are. So awesome on that, Chico. So next week, um, what we shall be doing is now we will also begin to bring a personal reflection on what you actually tried. Now, I'm very forgiving of the first few sessions because today the actual work starts of filling in the workbooks. And please, Johnson, remind me, as you often hold me accountable, that by tomorrow morning I'll share an updated workbook that has more explainer notes, so that even if someone does not fully remember what was said, as you're filling the workbook, there are a bit of notes to reference there. So Shiko, excellent, kudos, and the rest of us, Paul, Paula, Cassandra, Sonian, Margaret, every one of us here, George, Limo, and the rest. Let's be the champions in the triads, to cause these triads to do even more. Now, yes, last Tuesday I had several clients in the room who said we are forming the triad from here. And so I don't know, Johnson, were you able to do something as a team? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Ben? Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. So in short, and it's a really good form of accountability also. That you formed a group and you said, guys, we have until Saturday to get into the rhythm, and then from there, real work begins. Kudos, kudos. Lillian, I even just from the look you're giving, you are like, do not call my name. uh, Champion the team as well. Let's see where we go. And I know you are in the same triad with Paul, who is on this call. So Paul as well. The two of you, at least by the end of tonight, kunafaa kuwa na group ya watu wawili. Even the person who is on the decks, Limo himself. Yes, by the end of tonight. Now, I want to jump right in because tonight there's a bit to catch up. Now, what I'm covering today, and I want you to walk away with, is the art of setting goals. The art of setting goals. The reason I want us to be really good at this art of setting goals is that we started from phase one of saying, for us to move into the future, we must take a posture, Lillian, of beginning to paint a picture of a worthy goal. A picture of a worthy goal. Right? And then we said, you will walk away from part one of NZ based on the two assignments and everything we learned with one, a typical day in 2030. And we'll see how that comes into this phase, and an analysis of your abilities and your potential based on external and internal feedback. Do you remember that? Now, we came into phase two, Himaya, which I began to lay grounds for last week. And you said that if phase one is about what do you see, phase two is about where are you, where will you put your best energies. That is, where will you engage? And that's why the picture in the notes on Himaya, the question is, where will you engage? Because someone has to decide where they will deploy their strengths, where they will deploy their skills, where they will deploy their energy, right? And we said last week, just to set a base, we said that the vision that comes from part one of the program, NZ, and the portfolio analysis that comes from asking people for feedback, hearing God, analyzing your strengths, all these things, we now begin to structure them. We begin to do what, George? We begin to, there's a lot of information about your life, but you need to put it in a good structure. Now, the aim of doing all this is so that you are contextually rich as you set a goal. The other way to put that is that you have been well informed about your life, such that what you determine that is a worthy aim is informed by proper understanding, deep understanding. So, this part of the program is the part where we begin to put structure limo to your life. Mtu akikwambia tu nataka kujenga nyumba, muuza nyumba aina gani, rooms ngapi, wapi, vipi, floor ngapi, is it a townhouse, is it a bungalow? There is a structure that is needed in every discipline. And the goal, pale mwisho nataka mjue that the reason we are doing all these things is so that we can be really good at setting goals. Are we together? So the end product of my teaching is that you will learn the art of setting good goals. Now, pray for me that the next 45 minutes will run a marathon. Now, this portion I already mentioned that it is called Himaya, and it deals with the domains of your life. Deals with the domains of your life. We said that because God calls you a king in the marketplace, every king has a domain. This is why we have the word kingdom, king's domain, right? And we said that domains is the same word as saying key spheres or key portions of your life, Sonny, that you need to analyze so well, and they do not necessarily need to eat into each other, so that when you look at them, you have a holistic picture of yourself. All right? And we call those domains, we call those areas of your life your spheres. Your what? Your spheres of influence. All right. And we said the reason we are doing this analysis in this phase is because even if you have the grandest aspiration about the future, if you combine a good aspiration with a poorly analyzed present, you will be setting yourself up for failure. Okay? And we said, and I'm just running here quickly, that because this is a biblical program that is marketplace relevant and it's speaking the language of the boardroom, it is very important before we go into the tools and into the jargon to ask, does the Bible hold this to be true? And we said already that based on how God thinks and has taught us about analysis, about terrains, about domains, about territories, is that God demands that any man that he will work with to understand very well his allocated spheres of influence, his domains. And so I mentioned something you'll find in the note called the theology of terrain. I mentioned to us in passing that the first question God ever asks a man is a domain-related question. When God creates the first man, Adam, he gives him a domain. And God created a garden east of Eden. And he put the man that he had created in it. I put to you that no man on earth God released without a place he was supposed to administer. And so we are not creating things out of thin air. The theology of terrain, of domains, is clear in Scripture. And we said that every instruction of conquest that God has ever given anyone, he always mapped it clearly. He spoke of the boundaries of the promised land, the whole of Numbers chapter 34. He spoke of how, even in the book of Acts, when Paul was discussing with philosophers in Athens, he told them that it is God who fixes the boundaries of men and the seasons of their life. It is to tell you, Johnson, that there is a boundary that has been fixed for you, that you were not born when you were born at the wrong time. You're not in this city at the wrong time. God fixes the boundaries. So, Limo, analyze them well because they exist. Are we together? And we said that as we conduct this analysis I'm about to show us, is that we will be specific, because God is what? Specific. God is not general about the areas he wants us to administer, Paula. God asks men in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, to go and spy out. So, right now, when I give us the assignment, Shiko, to go and ask for feedback from colleagues, what I'm telling you is that be a good spy. Be a good what? Spy. Sit with people in coffee conversations, and what you're doing is that you are obeying God by spying things out. Go and spy out whether the land is good or bad, whether the people are strong or weak, whether the cities are fortified, or whether there is the people are what? They are giants or they are grasshoppers. And by the way, come back with a fruit. This is what in the world we call a minimum viable product. A minimum viable product. And here I noted, and I saw Cassandra's comment that faith that refuses to count difficulty, it is not faith. I said that that is avoidance that is dressed as trust. We must count difficulties. We must count what? Faith does not ignore mountains. So survey the land and survey it well. Now, how do we actually survey? We survey our life, Johnson, by breaking our lives or seeing our life like the way you would see the parts of a big chunk of territory. Now, our country has a survey map. Our country has what? How is our country divided? So our country is divided administratively into politically and administratively into counties. Is there a chance, but if you understand a bit of how our counties work, you'll understand that the 47 counties come from the former 8 provinces. All right? And you'd understand that even before we had counties, we had a system of local administration through municipals and municipalities. Do you remember? Now, is there any, if you don't map your county well, you are in trouble financially, because there's no way the money allocated to Bungoma County will find itself in West Pokot. Because the way mapping is done determines even flow of revenue. Just like in your life, if you map well, it will determine flow of grace, flow of results. Okay? Now, we follow something called a decentralized system of government. And our decentralized system of government says that there are 2 levels of government, the national and the subnational. Now, the subnational is what we call county governments. And the county governments, they share a revenue. That's why in this country there's something called a division of revenue bill. There is an appropriation bill. There is a mechanism by which the resources of a country flow to the mapped domains. Am I speaking to someone? There is a mechanism in which I'm about to show you 6 domains or to remind you. And if you map them well, Johnson, there is a mechanism in God that the resources of God, the allocations of God, the influence that God packaged for you will begin to flow. And sometimes it flows in a particular order, that it will hit one domain before it hits another. This is why it is possible to find a man with great grace first in relationships with people before he has grace in production. But there is a way God structures those things. And if you don't see them, you will treat your life as one block of things. But there is no country that is run as a block of things only. Yes, there is uniformity at the top, but there are specificities at the bottom. In fact, we move from the national government to the county government to the 47 units. And in those 47 units, we have what? We have words. And in those words, we're supposed to have a village system, right? Yes. There is a system there. I digress. And so let's move straight to, if countries have domains, if companies have domains, because what is the equivalent of a domain in a company? Departments, right? Then, Margaret, what are the domains of your life? These are the domains that I mentioned This is the model that I give us. You can use it as you grow and become more sophisticated. You can expand it or make it leaner. But our life has primarily 6 domains. The domain that is responsible for the source of everything called you, which we call the altar, and I call it the king's source. And this domain deals with what? Your personal devotion and your fellowship and spiritual mentorship. So, personal devotion is everything between you and God. Fellowship and spiritual mentorship is everything about your life in God as lived amongst the people of God. Whether that's, if someone here says, I think I want to have a better relationship with my pastor, and you have such an objective, it is there. But it falls under what? Fellowship and spiritual mentorship. The king's source is a very important domain. Because Cassandra, this is the domain, Patricia, that the Bible calls the well. Guard your heart. Because out of it, what happens? Springs forth. The other version says, are the outgoings of the things of life. And that is why the first thing we always do, Sarah, is to guard as a king. And I'm carrying this metaphor of a king because I don't want you to lose visibility of it. That is why I changed it from before I used to call it my altar. I called it the king's source. Because I need you to carry an awareness, Limo, that there is an identity I have with God in the marketplace. There is an identity I have. And that identity, for it to flourish, every king has a source. And this speaks to the matters of your heart. The Bible calls it the well. This deals with what the Bible calls holy ground. Every king, oh Moses, before you are anything, before you are a redeemer, you must come to the holy ground. And this is the place you take off your sandals. This is the place you honor. This is the place you will never grow big enough. This is the place you will always treasure. It doesn't matter how much you expand in life. This is the place you will come diligently. I had a clip that moved me. I've seen it shared several times. It was Dr. Paul Eneche of Dunamis canceling his church because his church is a massive church with great and gifted people. And he was saying, if you're gifted in this church, you must not operate without a place you serve. And he gave example of a Nigerian billionaire who moves with a megaphone to do street evangelism. And he owns, you've seen that clip. And he gives several examples. Because a king must know his source. Now, because of time, I don't want to digress, but you understand that the best example is King David. King David shows us, when you read his Psalms, you're like, are these the Psalms of a king? Or are these things written by someone who is training to make ends meet? But it's because he understands source. The second domain of your life, once you've mapped the domain called your source, which is your altar, is the relationship domain. And this is the domain that deals with what, Limo? This is the domain that we call the king's court. Who is in your life? The court of a king has all kinds of people. Now, the concept and the theology of the king's court is not new. We know very well that Isaiah, as a prophet, was connected to the king, and he was always prophesying from the court. So the court of a king is who is in your life, and it has 3 circles. The inner circle is your spouse, children, and parents. The next circle is family and friends, close friends. The third circle is the professional network. This is a very important domain. You do not want to get this domain wrong. The what? The circle. I'll be reminding us briefly. Did you notice? If I had time, I would show you. In the notes, you will see something I've put in these notes, that at one point, all the kings of Europe were related. Limo, if you move ahead for those people following online to page next, you'll see a page that is written domain 3 relationships. Did you know that when we went to the Second World War, the 3 kings of the nations that went to war, Britain, Russia, and Germany, were all first cousins. They were all first cousins. And they said that if their grandmother woke up, Queen Victoria, he would have whipped them to ending the war. He would not have been happy with them. There is a famous photo, the next slide, that is called the photo of the 9 sovereigns. During during one of the burials of of the father of the king that abdicated, uh, many royals of Europe came, and in that photo, 9 monarchs, reigning monarchs, were in that single picture. You'll see them from the king of Norway, the king of Spain, the king of Bulgaria, the king of Portugal, the king of Denmark, and all these were related as cousins. They were related by marriage. It is to tell you that even in the traditional sense, kings understand that you do not rule alone. If you're David, you need Ahithophel. And when Ahithophel deserts you, you will raise a psalm of sorrow. And God will replace Ahithophel with someone like Hushai. Amen? Let me not belabor this point. Next, the next domain, domain 3, is the domain of your health. I won't belabor that. This is your health carries both body and mind. It is the seat of your transformation. The next domain carries 3 key things I call the king's trade. It carries what? Your work, which is what you offer the world, where you offer it, which is the market, and what you get from offering it. So it has what? My offer, the package I bring. I am a skillful salesperson. This is my offer. Where do I sell it? I sell it in this industry. And currently, I am selling it under Company X. That Company X and that industry is what we call what? The market, the trading floor. Okay? And then what is next? After I offer it, I retain something. Now, if you have a goal of increasing in earnings, we know that there are several ways you increase in earnings. And when we get there, we will ask then, how does a king's trade begin to expand so that he is able to retain more? Because the Bible says that it takes strength to retain wealth. So when I trade, there is a way I can trade so that I retain wealth. Amen? The king's reach. The king's reach is Margaret's contribution and impact. Because a king does not serve within the circle of himself. It is to the intent that George will have an impact first to the people around him. First, an impact that is visible through personal transformation. Then the people around him, his family. And then the circle of people. And then the wider world. A king must think about contribution and impact. And lastly, a king must rest. The king's rest. This one we call it active leisure and renewal. Active leisure and what? Someone was giving an example. I don't know what I was listening to. Someone was giving an example of how Dr. Dre, one of the moguls in the music industry, became wealthy. And he became wealthy not with albums, but he became wealthy because people listen to music as a hobby. People buy headphones so that they can walk around enjoying music. And then he understood that you can actually make proper headphones and sell them. And they began really to move. And he became a billionaire out of a hobby, headphones. And I believe currently Beats by Dre was actually acquired by Apple for quite a huge amount of money. So yes, Himaya is about analyzing domains. These are the 6 areas that you'll find in your workbook to analyze. Are we together? Now I want to go straight to how then you begin to pick each one of these. Because the assignment we have next week, and next week but one, is to pick one of these domains this week, which is the first one, the king's source. And to begin to now say, how do I use this framework, Simon, you're giving us, so that I can be properly mapping my life? area by area. And we will not be in a hurry because we want to do a good job. And so we will pick area 1 and area 2. So next week, you handle two things: the king's source and the king's health. The king's source and the king's health. And if you pray for me well, I will run us today through a quick example of actually how to do it. And you will see all the way from step by step, 8 steps that I want to show us quickly. So, the 6 areas, you zoom in on one at a time. You zoom in on one at a time. So, we're on the slide, how to diagnose and focus. Because you will notice that I have broken each of the domains to subdomains. Okay? So, George, Paul, in your domain called the king's source, which is your altar, it has 2 key subdomains. Just like accounting has several domains, we break it down to one area we call private devotion, and then fellowship and what? And spiritual mentorship. Let's pick the second domain, the king's health. It has 2 domains, subdomains: your physical health and your mental health. Your physical health and your mental. Now notice, because we have 6 areas, we are not forming goals at the end on all the subdomains. We form goals at domain level. And I will explain how. All right? The reason we break one area of your life into smaller areas is because you don't want to miss out the details. You don't want to miss out what? The details. Now, a quick run on how this will look like. You will pick one area and you'll find that each of that area, let's pick, because the easier one, everyone can understand this. Let's pick the area of your health. It has body and mind as the 2 subdomains. You will go to your potential portfolio and you will fill in the strengths that you already know you have in the physical health area and in the mental health area. Then, next to the strengths, and I will demonstrate, don't worry, you'll fill in gaps that you have in that physical health area. And then next to that, you will fill in barriers. Now, strengths are things that you've already known you have. Okay? So for instance, you see an example of someone who is already has was already born with strong genes. You know, someone was saying if there are certain communities that in the construction industry they don't do well because that industry requires strength. Now, while in this country we like stereotyping communities, it's only that their area of gifting has not been put to the best use. So, without mentioning, you know that there is a community that is known for brute strength. So you'll find them on top of construction buildings, and I'm telling you, those guys, the kind of concrete work they do. Now, I believe that God gifted that community strength. If Satan was not involved and we were not living in a fallen world, we would see their strengths excelling in even more honorable aspects. Just like we know there is a community that is very good at measuring, cutting, artistic things. There's a community that if your car has a dent, hey, they will tell you, usijali. There's a way they will deal with it. And bad luck to you if you find an Al-Kalau member and decides he's the one who is fixing your dents. Yeah, you will know later. So you want to already identify the strengths, look at the gaps, and I will teach us that gaps are, what am I currently dissatisfied with in this area? Or what do I sense is God's rebuke to me in this area? And then lastly is a barrier. And barriers are always 2 kinds. There are internal barriers, which you can do something about. They are called weaknesses. And there are external barriers, which are imposed on you by circumstances. They are threats. Now, don't worry, Simon, you're running too fast. I'll give us an example shortly. Sawa sawa. Yes. But so that my example works very well, I want to show you a process end to end. A process end to. So I want to show you how this analysis from the potential, the vision on a typical day moves all the way so that you're able to set a good goal. Sawa. So let's go to what I promised in the next 20 minutes, the art of setting a good goal. And remember, we will set 6 goals. We'll have 6 goals. Is that we will have 2 goals per week. 2 goals per, but there is where those goals will come from. Now, before Margaret or Sarah or Patricia or Paula sets any goal, there's something to understand about what goals are. Now, think of this as levels. Think of this as levels. So, Limon, purpose encompasses your entire life. It is the totality. For you to fulfill your purpose, there is a number of years you must live. Are we together? Now, because you're not living your life at once, you have to step down a bit. And how you step down from purpose is that you take purpose and you cut a slice of it and you capture it as a vision. And you capture it as a vision for a particular period of time. This is why part 1 of this program ends with, what do you see? It is an attempt to position you to begin to capture a slice of your purpose. Now, I believe, this is my own theory, in the corporate world, when I teach strategy and I do strategy, we do 5-year visions. I believe that Christians should do around 3-year to 3.5-year visions. Why? It's just a preference that Jesus was with the disciples for 3.5 years. So that should be the portion of time to look at. So let's assume that if your purpose is to build Christian communities in urban areas that will do X, that thing you need to do it over a long period of time. And you will not even know that your purpose fully is to build Christian communities. It is when you look back, you realize, wow, my purpose was actually to build Christian communities. So what you will begin to do so that you can fulfill that is to cut a slice of it and to ask, in the next 3 years, what would be an aspiration that fulfills me and gives God a fruit look like? Okay? Then that slice, as you're beginning to see that future, you are already planning towards fulfilling your purpose. Are we together? So from your whole life to Mekuja to 3 years. Now, from 3 years, there is no way to just fulfill something you saw. You must structure something you saw into something doable. Now, how you structure a vision is that you use goals. Okay? Now, goals turn a vision into a doable and implementable portion. So let's assume this person whose purpose is to build Christian communities in urban centers says that, you know what, in the next 3 years, I want to have built 1 children's home. Just an example. Now, that's a vision, that's an aspiration. That's person feeling envy, saying, what do you see? I see a 100 capacity children's home for gifted and vulnerable young people in the urban areas. How does that vision become implementable? He takes that and he says, to do this, I will need goals. And the first goal is identify a needy location and do X. Now, notice, now that has stepped down to a goal. So if he has, the day after, if he says identify a location that has needy people that I am targeting based on the way I have defined them, and then that is the first goal, and commence construction. If he does that and he says he will do that in 3 months, in 6 months, he's already moving towards the vision. But not just that, he's already living purpose. Are we together? Because I want us to see the flow of this thing. So in a sense, you can understand this, that purpose is your entire life, vision is a slice of it, goal is a sub-vision. It's another smaller slice of a vision. Only that at goal level, there is implementability. Because you're not able to implement anything at vision level, neither are you able to implement something at purpose level. Purpose guides, purpose fuels, purpose authorizes in the spirit. Are we together? Vision guides direction. Vision shows you the boundaries. Are we together? All right. Now, the model that I have given us, Shiko, of 6 domains of a king, if we capture one goal each in all of them, these goals, if we hit them, we will have moved to a portion of purpose. We will have activated a future we have seen. And therefore, I said that your overall vision isn't something separate that you only write once. It is the sum, notice, of the outcomes that your goals achieve. So if this person wanted to build Christian communities and said that he will build a 100-seater children's home and sets goal number 1 to identify the land and to commence construction, goal number 2 to find sponsorships and to establish several facilities, including classes and dormitories and all these things. If he does all those things, goal 1, identify and begin construction. Goal 2, get partners and resource the place. Goal 3, set up a learning facility and dormitories. Imagine what happens when he hits goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. If you add them together, what do they become? They become outcomes that fulfill a vision. Do you see what I mean? Yes. So if you want to fulfill a vision, you definitely need what? Goals. And so I noted here that without goals, you cannot tie outcomes to choices. If you don't have goals, you do not know how what you are experiencing came about clearly. You cannot link what you're experiencing with the choices that you have made. Are we together? And even worse, you cannot refine your choices so that you experience in future what you see. So goals then are a critical player for anyone who will enter their vision state and who will live their purpose. Okay? Now, my huge jargon there is just to say that a goal is not a complicated thing. A goal is what we call a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess. You're saying my goal in my career is my best educated guess on if I set the target of completing my master's as a goal. I am saying, Limo, that that's the best educated guess I have on how I will close my gap. Let's say I feel that, oh, Simon, as a consultant, you can make a lot more money if you did a PhD. You see, there are many things I could do to make money, but I've decided that my goal is to pursue a PhD. Then I'm saying that that goal is my best guess. Why am I saying I will pursue a PhD? Because I feel a gap between what I'm earning and the aspiration that I have. So this goal of complete a PhD program is my best educated guess or my bet that if I hit this target called PhD, I will close my earning wage gap. You see that word is coming up again, gap? Because goals come from gaps. Goals come from where? Okay, let's start our journey now. Everyone, wherever you are, stretch, because in the next 15 minutes, we'll determine the assignment we will have. So how do we generate goals? Limo, what was the topic again? The art of goal setting. So we generate goals by looking, one, if you look at your assignments that you did, if you look at si tumechukua domain moja, tukaijaza, and we said that in one domain, the subdomains we have body and mind, we will fill a strengths column, then we will feel a gap scholar. Gaps are what? What I am currently dissatisfied. In fact, if we were in a proper training facility, I would say in your physical health, what are you currently dissatisfied with? If you just wrote down quickly, you would notice that there would be 3 to 4 to 5 things you'd say. You'd say, maybe I'm feeling too fatigued. Maybe I'm not sleeping well. Maybe I'm feeling that I am not as strong as I used to be. I'm climbing stairs, Ninahema. Maybe I know I am not eating as clean as I should be eating. All these things. So there are things you're dissatisfied with. So one of the places that goals come from, and this is why the way you do the assignment will really matter, is that, remember, you will need to fill the gap place. Goals come from your sharpest gaps. Sharpest gaps. So Shiko, this week, as you fill in the workbook, area domain 1 and 2. Let me use domain 2. Guys, follow me. I'm using domain 2 because it's much easier. So as John fills his gaps in the area of physical and mental health, there is one gap that shouts, that is sharp. That gap can mostly be turned into a goal. Are we together? Because that gap tells you that there is something to be closed. And so for you to close that gap that you see, if I feel, for instance, I feel a gap that I am not as strong, I am not ready to climb Gong, is a gap already. That tells me that I need to set a target so that I can close the gap. What target would I set? Maybe I would set a target that I will try and walk. And I had said that I will try and walk. I'll see whether I can walk 5 kilometers per week to be ready for. This was my own goal. An actual one. Because I was like, hey, last week we were here and then Paul said that nimekuwa Ngong, siyo easy. I said, where? I need to set a target of walking around, maybe I'll start with how many kilometers did I say I need to walk? 5 kilometers, yes. I need to start walking several kilometers. What I'm saying is to close the gap I see, which is that I may not be as energetic and I might have 2 off days, which I don't have after the 12th. I need to close that gap. And I'm setting a target of what? 5 kilometers per week. Are we together? So I'm taking my gap and I'm turning it into a goal. The next place that gaps come from, again, why this assignment mattered. Remember your typical day in 2030? If you read, for those who have written, and if you write if you haven't, your typical day in 2030, and then you honestly sit with yourself and you say, okay, Simon, this is the day you have described aspirationally as your best day in 2030. But where are you today? That delta is just the difference between 2030 July minus 2026 July. When I do minus in my area of physical health, that delta can become a goal. Are we together? And of course, the other one is feedback. So, step number 1 in the art of goal setting is that utilize the analysis that you have done in the subdomains and look at either your sharpest gap, okay, your sharpest gap, or the biggest difference between what you described as your aspiration in 2030 and where you are today. Or consistent feedback. Now, consistent feedback really matters, especially professionally, because there are people who are really good at giving you feedback. Is that clear? So that's step number 1. Now, step number 2. So let's say I have a goal already. The step number 2 is that I will need to create a rival goal. I have said here that the enemy of a good choice is a single option. Paula, when you have a single option, you're not choosing, you're simply defending it. So if you want to really refine your goals, make a habit of not settling on one goal first. Ask, what would be a real alternative that is different from this one, but that achieves the same underlying target. So don't change the target. So, for instance, I said that in my thinking, I'm not ready. My body is not fully ready to climb Ngong on the 12th. And that gap that I feel, I converted it into a goal of walk 5,000 steps a week. Now, before I settle on that goal, can I create an alternative goal that I call a rival goal? That alternative goal that I will create should achieve the same purpose, but it should be different. So, what else can I do? Because what is the purpose? To get ready physically for the climb on 12. There is another way besides walking 5,000, which means I can do what? I can say I will be in the gym three times a week, and make sure that I run on the treadmill for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or use, there's even an easier one which I don't take, which is I live on the 12th floor. I can decide that I will be climbing the stairs twice a day, because I used to climb them and counted them, so they are quite cumulatively. If I climb twice a day, my knees will suffer, but it will be like climbing Ngong Hills. Do you see? A rival goal. That's step number 2. A mutually exclusive goal. Step number 3 in good goals setting is testing your goals. Testing what? Your goals. And how we test goals, oh my God, is that we ask the question, for this to be a good goal, what would have to be true? Like for me to say that walk 5,000 kilometers a day, what would have to be true? First, it would have to be true that I actually have, for me to walk 5,000 kilometers a day, it means that I either walk 1,000 kilometers, 5,000 kilometers a week. It means that I need to walk 1,000 kilometers a day for at least 5 days, right? So it would have to be true that my life can be readjusted and my commitments in a way that I can have safe 1,000-kilometer walking distance within a day, right? Whether it's in the morning. You see the math? Is that true? What would have to be true? Is that condition creatable, if I can use such a word? So, do you know why some goals fail? Most goals fail, by the way, because we never ask this question. We set a really good goal, but we don't ask Paula, we don't ask Margaret, what would have to be true about my life for this goal to actually work? Now, if I went for the rival goal, which was go to the gym 3 times a day, then what would have to be true? And I'm just listing one. There will be several for you to do. Is that first I would have to have a gym membership, right? Then still I would have to have 45 minutes blocked for 3 times a week. And the gym would somehow have to be within a location that I can walk to, drive by, all these kinds of things. So you look at, even if it is not currently true, notice I've not said what is true. I'm saying what condition is possible for this goal to be a good goal. That's step number 3. Testing your goals. Step number 4. Step number 1, we said, you look at your gaps. You look at the difference between your ideal day in 2030 and today, or you look at feedback and create a goal. All right? Step number 2, we said create a rival goal. Step number 3, test the goal by asking what would have to be true. Step number 4, identify the failure condition. I call it the hinge condition. Of all those conditions that you have listed, this would have to be true, this would have to be true, this would have to be true. Ask, of these conditions, which one is the fundamental one that if it cannot be true, it doesn't matter what else is true. For instance, if for me to walk 5,000 steps a day, I would need a safe place. I would need walking shoes. I would need a, a safe path, a time schedule, all these things. Of those four conditions, walking shoes, safe route, uh, and even put condition number 3, a schedule that I can block for 1 hour. Of those 3 conditions, which one, if it does not exist, every other goal fails? It is the fact that if I cannot actually have time in my week to do the walking, even if I buy sport shoes today, that is the fundamental failure condition. So, of all the things about that you set as goals, you have to look at your failure condition. If you say you are applying for a job and you say get a job at X time, you'd have to ask what would have to be true for the goal that I have set. Then you ask, of these conditions, which one is the failure condition? Now, the failure condition is also usually the goal that you are least concerned, that you're most concerned about. That you're most concerned? Step number 5, articulate failure. Don't mumeona hiyo safari yote tumewalk, generate goal, tukagenerate rival goal, tumeitest, tumeangalia under what condition it fails, sindio? Then we say, let's assume it has already failed. How did it fail? Write it. When you imagine your goal has already failed, let me tell you see more ways in which that goal can fail. And therefore, you are able to already, as you're planning, defend against that failure. Like most of you, if you analyze some of the goals you set in the past, how they failed, if it is not, some of the ways they failed is not new. You already knew. If you had written it down, you'd have said, I can do something here, I can do something here, I can do something here. For instance, I shared with you that one of the reasons my gym memberships would always lapse is that I never had a personal trainer. So I would count on motivation. Motivation, psych. And then hit the gym and then feel good, walk around feeling I am in the club of the people who work out, people who are healthy. I don't know what is wrong with people who do not work out. You know, nasa you may work out siku mbili. And then you need to articulate, how does it die? Do you know how it dies? It dies by, I simply skipped. This is a commitment I made privately. Nobody else knows. So I can always adjust and say, hey, hata Simon uko serious. Sasa, ni job utafanya ama ni jibu utaenda. Si utafuta pesa kwanza. You know, all these kinds of things. If you articulate that, then I realize that because I had a very weak accountability mechanism. So my next subscription, in my articulating how it dies, it dies on week 5. After I travel, or after I have a highly demanding assignment that has come, and I explain it, that to look for money is better than to work out. Am I alone on that? And so, defend against that. Defend against? How do you defend against that? You defend against that by addressing what in your current behavior patterns, if you choose that goal, if you don't address, it will fail. For me, I addressed mine by simply hiring an instructor. And I told him from the word go that your biggest assignment is to hold me accountable. Now I'm looking for another one because that one also left. So as I conclude everything I've said, the art of setting a goal, please lend me 10 minutes. Let me give you a real example now. I want to introduce us to an avatar, an example of a guy called David. John, Margaret, Chico, Sarah, Patricia, Paula, and the rest of us here, meet David. So David is 36 years, okay? He's married with 2 children. He's a senior manager at a bank. And he travels quite a lot. 36, married with 2 children, a senior manager at a bank, travels quite a lot. Now, David has been feeling fatigued, tired, sluggish, but he's a sharp guy, he's smart, but he's feeling something is off. So David, to assume new flow. So we gave David the two assignments in NZ to do a potential audit and to say his typical days in 2030. So I want to read for us what David did because I want you to follow what I have taught you. So David conducted an audit through the 5 lenses I taught us. And I want us just to focus on what David brought out in his area of body. Physical health, the king's capacity. So he noticed in when he was doing his analysis that, historically I used to play competitive sports at university, but I have been so dormant. Hata sijui kama naweza kumbuka how I used to play. And then when he was still analyzing internally about his health, he knows, he knows that he has neglected his body. And he feels guilty every time he says, I will do something, I will walk, and then a deadline passes, he doesn't do it. Now, on feedback, he has had feedback both from a trusted colleague and his wife that, hey, nowadays, you're always fatigued. Mko na David? So far? Now, the other way that David noted when he was writing his portfolio is that recently kampuni yetu encouraged us to go and do medical checkups to utilize our cover. And when we did that, the doctor advised me and said, here there is something to look into, that your heart rate, your resting heart rate is quite high and you're not sleeping well. Mume notice hizo vitu zote? Because he's actually doing good analysis, all right? The other thing that imekuwa ikisumbua David is that when he looks at his colleagues, he can see that he has older colleagues, but they're even more sharper. Sometimes they leave later than him, and they are not as tired as him. So quickly, strength, David knows he used to play competitive sports. Sawa sawa. He noticed, internally he knows he's been neglecting his body. Externally, he has had feedback that he's always fatigued. Sawa. Ameenda kwa daktari soon and was told, hey, look at this. And also akiangalia kwa ofisi, he's like, sina movie bado, but I'm beginning to be too sluggish. Now, David also did his typical day in July 2030. Here is what David says. I woke up at 4:30. No hurry. I was clear-headed, meaning David at 4:30 had rested. Then he had 45 minutes of prayer, and then he did a short workout session at the corner of his bedroom. Does not require any gym. And then he was able to have a beautiful time at breakfast with his 2 children before they went to school and before he went to work. That day, David goes to the office. He has a very important meeting, and he has a lot of energy. By the end of that meeting, kila mtu anaambia David, Lillian, hey, that was really brilliant. You did the presentation well. It was powerful. And then that afternoon, he travels to Cameroon. And when he goes to the hotel, he writes in his journal that even on that day when he was in Cameroon, he still was able to do his workout, and he sleeps at 9:30 on this day. Not crashing out the way he used to do, he rests well. Now, David is so proud on this day in 2030 that his energy has been steady and he is at peak performance. Umeona David 2030? Sasa David ukimwambia ajaze domain yake yenye inaitwa king's capacity, physical health, what will David feel? Because this is what you will do this week. What will David feel in his area of strength? He will feel that he has a strong body gifted by genes that responds well to training. But he will say that in his gap, he is dissatisfied with the fact that he has very low physical activity, that his training schedule is always eaten by work duty, and that he got a recent warning by the doctor. So he is dissatisfied about what? About that. Then David will feel his barriers. He will say, okay, I have a strong body that I know I have neglected. And if I train it, it responds well. But I know that my routine for training never survives my travel or my work. And I have this warning to do something by the doctor. Barrier ni, what would keep me in this state? He knows that one of his barriers externally is the fact that he travels a lot. And by the time he arrives, he's tired, he wakes up late. Okay? One of his other barriers is that he knows that he has been lapsing gym memberships for the last 3 years. And that even when he starts a routine, inakufanga after 4 weeks. So he knows his barriers. Sawa sawa, tuko na David bado. Sasa twende kwa David, tumwambie David, keti hapa, formulate goals. Now flow, we learned that you formulate goals from 3 areas. You look at kwa hiyo audit ulifanya, at what was your sharpest gap, or what is the biggest difference between now and that 2030 that you have written, or what feedback do you have. Now David decides that he will create 2 goals. The first goal is he will base it on his biggest gap. What was David's biggest gap? That his body has been neglected and his energy is failing. Please bear with me. We'll share this link. Limo, share this link so that people will follow. Because what I'm saying is a mouthful. So he will say, this is the loudest dissatisfaction I have. And so he makes it his first goal. But then he says, okay, Simon said, let's create a rival goal. So if he says his first goal comes from the fact that he is dissatisfied with neglecting the body, where would he source his second goal? He says, I will source my second goal from Nikijiangalia 2030 and now. Sawa sawa. And when I look at that, I will create another goal. All right, let's look at the 2 goals that David ends up creating. So in step number 5, David creates these 2 goals. Listen, Johnson. First goal, complete a half marathon in 12 months. Complete a half marathon in 12? David says, this will be my goal number 1. Then he says, okay, what other goal will still achieve my physical health objective that is not marathon? He says, I will create a system, a daily system that will handle several things. 1, I must sleep for 7 hours a day. Okay. 2, I must have physical activities for 4 days a week. Okay. And these 2, they must happen whether I travel or not. Now, notice, if you were David, you're more likely to choose the goal that is shiny, that is nicely shareable. Unajua kuna goals zingine hata wewe ukisema that's your goal, everyone is like, and I'm saying this because in your triads, so you're likely to share a goal and people are like, is that really a goal? But then there are people like me who love grand things. You know, finish a half marathon by, everyone is like, I can see Stanchart Marathon, USIU Marathon, all this marathon. And then someone else says, a very humble goal. I just want to have a weekly system where I am able to sleep for 7 hours a day. I'm able to move my body for 4 days a week, physical activity. And that whether I am at home or somewhere else, it works. Okay? Now, next step, niliwambia, if you have rival goals, what do? You test them. And because you have these 2 goals, you ask, what would have to be true? What would have to be true? So he asked, what would have to be true for the half marathon to be a good goal? Says, first, for you to train for a marathon, hey, you really need to run properly. So then the question is, he tests, is it possible for me to have a fixed training schedule, running schedule? That's number 1. Okay? Then he asks, can my knees and joints and body tolerate this week in, week out. Okay? Then, can my family time allow this? Remember, he has 2 children. When he looks at that, it would have to be true that I can create 6 to plus hours per week to train for the marathon. It would have to be true that my work would allow me the days that I choose to actually run. It would have to be true that this happens whether I am in Nairobi or in Accra or in South Africa. When he looks at that, he is asking, can these conditions be created? If the answer is no, that goal dies. If the answer is no, that goal, so he goes to goal number 2 and he's subjected to the same test. The goal number 2 is as simple that I want a daily system of 7 hours of sleep, 4 hours of physical activity per week, whether I am at home or elsewhere. He says what would have to be true is that a simple program can actually survive my travels, my busy job. A simple program. 2, that I can be able to afford a protected sleep window of 7 hours, given that I am a parent. And whether he would have an honest way of noticing whether he is improving. Now notice, he realizes that 1, I can actually sleep for 7 hours if I change my sleeping time. Okay? I can actually, so tick, that condition can be created. Is there a system, a simple program that can survive nikiwa kwa hoteli? The answer is yes. I don't need a gym if I create a simple workout routine. I can buy a workout program that I work out with a coach virtually. I can do ABCD. So he ends up naming goal number 2 as the goal that he would go with. Now, do you notice that if he did not test some of these things, you're more likely to say, hey, do the marathon to support. All right? Now, finally, what else did we say after generate a goal from your gaps, from your difference between 2030 or feedback? Step number 1, right? Step number 2, create rival goals. Step number 3, ask what would have to be true. Step number 4, we said what? Look for the failure condition. So this goal that he has chosen, what is the one condition that if it does not happen, the goal will fail? It is the condition that if he does not create a simple enough yet effective program that can survive whether he is at home or he is elsewhere. Now, do you know that hata wewe could test what would have to be true in your failure condition? Just look at your life. Look at your past. Look at the goals you have set. And you will ask, does it actually work? Does it actually? How does it die? Which is now the final step. He says, okay, so I know that if this condition I don't guard against it, it will collapse my goal. So then what I need to do is to name it clearly and to defend against it. So David writes down, here is how my goal died. Here is how my goal says, my goal died quietly. I did not share my commitment with anyone. I simply defined real exercise as anything. Si kusema simple, remember it was a simple routine. So I did not define what a simple routine is. So me walking to go and buy a soda from the office, I defined it as simple routine. And so I did not end up having any structured and meaningful way of working out. And after several weeks of travel, I lost motivation. So 3 months in, there was no rhythm. There was no rhythm. And I simply slid back to the former old me. So if you know as David, that's how your goal dies, what do? You defend against that failure. You say, George, for me not to create a simple routine that is not defined, I will define that 15 minutes or 30 minutes of workout. Mnakumbuka his day in 2030, he said he woke up and worked besides the bed. So Shiko, you say, because I see this is how my goal will fail, I defend against it. So David says 15 minutes is the least amount of workout for me, whether I am in a hotel room or I am in my bedroom. But not just that, I am sharing this with my triad that from tomorrow, napitia Naivas, ninunue huto to weights tule kwenye wanakuanga kuna kanini kanakuanga Naivas to simple dumbbells na, and then I post that triad team, David, here I come, check in with me before Johnson posts in the group on Thursday. How is it going on your morning workout? 15 minutes minimum, 4 days a week, 7 hours of sleep. And so it's very simple if you're in the triad. This guy's in the triad because you just ask, how many hours of sleep this week? Did you hit your number of 7? If he says, I started very well, lakini kuna hii siku nililala 3. You're like, good progress, encourage. What do you think was the issue there? Do you see? Because, and next week I'll share more on this because I've rushed us. The way you defend against a death of a goal is that defense must be equal. So if my goals die because I travel, the way I defend against this must be tied to travel. If my goals die because I lose motivation, it means that I tie my goals to motivation, not commitment. Then I must defend against that aspect. So quickly, recap. The 10 minutes you gave me, they are over. The steps of setting a good goal. Use the analysis from potential audit and your day in 2030 to look at the gap or the differences or the feedback to design 2 goals. Step number 2, create rival goals that achieve the same thing, but they are differentiated. Step number 3, test the goals by asking what would have to be true for this to be a good goal. Step number 4, take those conditions that you have written and ask, of these conditions that would have to be true, which one am I most concerned that is not true? This is the failure condition. It's the hinge condition. Now, by the way, don't worry about all this English. It is in the workbook that I will share with you. Very easily explained. So as you fill each, there will be step this, what would have to be true, what you're supposed to do. All right? Yes. I knew that too much would be too much for us to grasp at once. After you test and you identify the failure condition, then you formulate the day that goal failed, and then you defend against it. And what you end up with, Johnson, is a goal that you have connected to your future. You have imagined how it can fail. You've already factored in that. So even as you begin to move, you already know what to look out for. All right? Now, allow me not to say anymore. I'll do a recap of what we've said today. So in this week's assignment, go and fill the strengths, the gaps, and the barriers in the workbook that I will share for domain 1 and 2 only. Domain 1 and 2 only. We will begin our next session next Tuesday with sharing triads. Remind the people to check in on how it's going as they are filling those domains. And then support each other, and then we will begin the sharing from there next week. I would like to, let me share this tomorrow. I'll make an announcement for for the 7 hours. And the other announcement that I will make also in the group, Johnson, remind me, is to have the people who would like to volunteer to form an ad hoc committee for the climb on the 12th to reach out so that we can start preparing for that, even as we prepare to work